My name is Kimberly Mena, and for my counseling informed consent form, I chose the first result that came up, which was from True North Christian Counseling. After comparing it to the list of ACA elements from Remley and Hurley 2016, I realized that there were some elements in its counseling form that did meet the ACA guidelines. There was one element where it kind of mentioned it but didn't really go too far into detail, and then there were some elements that were just missing entirely. So for the elements that were present according to the ACA guidelines, the purpose, goals, and risk of services. They also did the implications of a diagnosis, the fees and billing information, and also the confidentiality and its limitations. For the confidentiality and its limitations, I feel like this consent form really did a great job of explaining possible scenarios where the counselor would actually have to release certain information about the client, and it made it really easy for the client to understand. Another element that was contained was actually the client's right to refuse service. They said if the client became uncomfortable with anything at any point in time, that they can discontinue counseling, and that the counseling service would be more than happy to give them resources as well as referrals. The one area where this consent form did meet the ACA guideline but didn't really, expand upon it was listing the counselor qualifications and expertise. In this consent form, it didn't actually list the counselor's expertise or anything like that. I'm assuming because True North Christian Counseling is a large agency or firm, it has numerous amounts of counselors. So in this form, it actually does just recommend for the client to speak to the counselor about all of their qualifications and their expertise, just so that the client does understand what their specific counselor is good for. So the areas in this form that it did not touch on at all was the arrangement for continuation of services if the counselor is dead or unavailable. The only sort of thing that they had about this was that if the client had an emergency situation outside of their normal hours, who to contact. It also didn't talk about the role of technology at all, or the counselor's right to obtain information about their records. So, those are definitely some things that they should have touched on, but was missing entirely. So, unlike the ACA, the laws and statutes of Florida actually doesn't have an express list of elements that has to be contained in informed consent. It just says that informed consent is just defined as basically voluntary consent given in the form of writing by a person after explanation of the matter without any form of force. So in definition of Florida standards, this form would absolutely, meet the informed consent standards. So overall, I felt like this form, did meet everything that informed consent should be. Overall, it was a good form. It did explain everything that a client would need to know walking into counseling. As Granello and Young 2019 said, counselors have a duty to give the clients the information that they need without overwhelming. And I feel like this form did a really great job of providing clients with the bare necessary information that they would need in order to enter into a counseling agreement, understanding everything that the counselor could and couldn't do, as well as what their rights are. However, if I could revise this form, I would add the areas that are missing from the ACA standard, just because I do understand how important it is to be ACA compliant. So if I could change this form at all, that's what I would do. Well, that's what I have to say about the informed consent form that I looked at. I look forward to seeing all of your videos about your states and your informed consent forms. Have a great night.